Welcome back. Our next guests are joining us to dive into the details of estate planning and ask the question, do you understand the importance of protecting your inheritance for your beneficiaries? Well, attorneys Jeffrey Burr and Carrie Stevens, they're here with Jeffrey Burr Law Firm to help give us some answers. Good morning. Welcome in.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So there's trusts and there's wills. How does a trust protect your beneficiary more than a simple will does?
Well, for example, in a trust, you can put certain provisions in to protect your beneficiaries depending upon the situations that they may find themselves in. So, for example, if a beneficiary is going through a divorce or has a judgment creditor against them or possibly going through bankruptcy, you can put provisions into your trust document that would protect that inheritance for them rather than it going to some unintended third party.
Aha, so it's just like, in case of me getting a divorce between when I wrote this and not, it doesn't go to that person, it then goes to this person.
Correct.
So it's like a choose your own adventure book for your will, which is great. Okay, I like that. I know under Nevada law there's a bequest, I believe, or from a will or a distribution from a trust, sole, and separate property of the benefit. Explain what I'm saying here, because this is over my head. This is what you guys deal with all the time.
Okay, this is really important to remember, and that is in Nevada, under even our community property laws, inheritances and bequests are the sole and separate property of the recipient, as long as they don't commingle it with a spouse.
Okay.
So you got to make sure that you set up your plan in a way that it facilitates these assets not being commingled or susceptible to a spouse trying to reach them, basically.
Yeah, if you're explicitly trying to save something for a child or for somebody else, you want to make sure that it stays for them and it doesn't get brought into the whole community or it gets picked apart by perhaps the spouse.
Yes.
Gotcha. Does half belong by default? So how does the community, how does that work here in Nevada when it comes to splitting something?
When the bequest is received by the recipient, it is separate property.
Okay.
The spouse doesn't have any ownership in it, even though it is a community property state. So as long as you take safeguards to protect that separate property and keep it separate and not commingle it with the community, then you can retain that separate property character and preserve it for the bloodline or your intended beneficiaries.
This is why it's so important to have people like you in our corner, because frankly, for a lot of us, this is like, wait a second, it's a lot to grasp. You must deal with this on a daily basis, people coming in trying to get their ducks in a row, right?
Yes, and in fact, often, and Carrie especially, she deals with trust administrations in our office, and so often you'll bring an heir in to tell them about an inheritance they're receiving. Yeah. And of course, they'll bring a spouse with them, and the spouse has a big, broad smile on his or her face, thinking, all right, we're getting this money in, and we're going to be just great, you know, and then we have to inform the one receiving the money that it's important that they not commingle it with the spouse, but they keep it in a separate... Because
it was the wishes of the person that it didn't go to the other person, which will make for a very uncomfortable conversation at Thanksgiving.
Yes.
The distribution, so this is a future ex-spouse. I've seen this happen before, where somebody passes away and then there's this big thing. There was a marriage that was on the outs, but they weren't officially divorced yet. How susceptible is like a regular will to that future ex-spouse from being able to take advantage of that situation?
Well, again, if you're receiving something outright rather than in trust, then that is going to be susceptible to any proceeding you're going through. A divorce proceeding, it would become an accountable asset, or if you were going through a bankruptcy, you know, it could be attached by the trustee. So it's important to have it in trust and have those provisions that protect it from those unintended consequences.
The most important thing for me, I got 2 kids now, and I just think, all right, heaven forbid, you know, I'm leaving this planet soon. How can I make sure they're set up? What's the best thing a parent can do to make sure that a child's inheritance is protected?
Well, there's a couple things you can do, especially for younger children. It's critical to have a trust, because if you just have a simple will at age 18, they're entitled to the distribution from the will.
It's all right. We're all financially responsible at 18, right? No problem with that. But you could actually, with a trust, you could say explicitly how and when that money or stuff could be used.
Yes, and in fact, you could even make it a trust that is what we call a beneficiary directed trust, where it stays in trust even after for a long time after your death, and the beneficiary will still have use and enjoyment of it, but it's kept free from creditors, spouse, you know, we call predators sometimes, unfortunately, ex-spouses, not always, but Or you can just specify in your trust that before the beneficiary receives a distribution, they must create their own separate trust to receive the distribution.
Trust to a trust.
Yes.
There we go.
Yes.
This is why it's important to have people like, if we're not here on the planet anymore, we need somebody to do our bidding. And this is why it's important to have you guys in our corner. It's great having you.
Thank
you
you.
so much
Thank
for
you.
joining us.
Thank
you.
Listen, you can contact Mr. Burr, Mrs. Stevens, if you'd like to have any help with a will or a trust. Jeffrey Burr Law Firm, they're located on Charleston, just west of Wallapai. The other on Paseo Verde and Henderson. Their number and website, both right there on your screen. Jeffrey Burr Limited, a proud sponsor of the Morning Blend, and they're going to help you from predatory ex-spouses.